I hit something, and I hit something so hard, glass flew in my mouth. I'm like, what was that? And I found out the next day it was an off-duty police officer, and I killed him instantly. 22 years old. He wasn't going to get a chance to go home to his family. It's right before Christmas, so no Christmas for his family. They were going to be planning a funeral instead of a family Christmas. And I was looking at like 45 years, but also trying to deal with the fact that I'd killed somebody, and I thought it was over with.
Welcome back to another episode of Have Cakes podcast. With me today is a guest that I am super pumped to bring to you. But before we get into that, I want to just introduce this episode. This is a special episode for me. This is one of our longer form episodes. Every Wednesday we put out a long form, real raw conversation where I sit down with a special person in my life and we talk about life, talk about the things that we've been through, the perspectives, the lessons we've learned. Saturdays, we have something that I call a strategy sprinkle. It's a little bit more practical, tactical advice for how to grow in all areas of your life. Mondays, we have a Mindset Monday, which is a short form episode just to give you a little bit of a perspective for the week. But again, today being Wednesday, being our long form episode, I'm bringing to you today a good friend of mine, someone who, when I first met and I heard his story and I heard basically everything that he's been through, the life that he's experienced, it reminded me a lot of myself in the early success and like you're living the life, man. You've got all the things that you want, but it just wasn't complete. And the trials and tribulations that our guest has gone through honestly far exceed the difficulty from my perspective that even I've gone through. And his story of redemption and turning something that could be life ending to something that is really life beginning and going out to then multiply and create and use that experience to do good is so inspiring to me that sometimes I will literally sit and listen to him retell that tale just to get inspired myself. So for me, the opportunity to have this conversation is such an honor and a blessing, and I know that you're going to get a lot out of it. So without further ado, Guy Jones, man, I am so overjoyed to have this conversation with you, and would just love for you to share what's on your heart and give people a little bit of a background for who you are and kind of how we got here.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a pleasure to be on this podcast, and the title, No Half Cakes, and really making sure that you show up to the areas that you need to have these experiences, the priorities and things that matter in life. I'm thankful for that opportunity. And before I get into my story, my stepdad, who is a guy I look up to tremendously and a huge mentor in my life, he says, to do more, you have to be more. That's like his quote. To do more, you have to be more. Well, if we're on just a comfortable trajectory and everything's good, but we're not shooting for greatness, or we're not pushed outside of our comfort zone by adversity, a lot of times we can't do more in life. So this, like Jim was saying, my adversity that I've been through inspires him. Well, that adversity that I've been through, that a lot of y'all listening to a podcast like this have been through, because only men of excellence and people of excellence are really going to listen to podcasts. People that want to learn, people that want to understand other people's philosophies and grow and take what they can from somebody else and discard the rest. And for me, my greatest life growth has happened through tremendous adversity that I don't wish on anybody. So maybe today you don't have to do more necessarily to be more. You don't have to be more to do more. You can just listen to some of these stories and be more, because I paid my price, and that may help pave your road. So essentially, I'm from Tallahassee, Florida, and my mom and dad divorced when I was at a young age, like 2, and my stepdad came in my life, and he was a professional baseball player. He was a coach. He was a leader. He is a leader. And out of all my brothers, I'm the youngest. He's like, and Guy, out of all my sons, you're the hardest worker. And he told me that at a young age. And he always told me that. And it ended up manifesting itself. And anywhere I go, I know that's one thing that's special about me is I can work harder than anybody else. I'm willing to work harder. It's just in my nature to work harder. Now, when he first started telling me that may have not been the case, but he spoke that over me. So I always tell men, be aware of what you're speaking over your children. There's so much power in the tongue. So speak life, speak their gifts, speak their potential, speak identity over your kids. So I grew up with my stepdad, 3 brothers, but I had a lot of adversity at a young age. My mom struggled with some serious mental illness, and for like 15 years just couldn't even get out of the house, couldn't work. And you're talking about a woman who was a valedictorian over high school, never made a B, beautiful, long brunette hair, just gifted, all the gifts in the world. And her illness came from spirituality, is what I perceived it. She started going to a Church of God, and somehow she got involved in a deeper level and maybe unbalanced. Maybe it was a spiritual attack. I don't know, but I do know it made me totally reject Christ, reject any idea or form of religion, and that it was not of God because it didn't bring joy, peace, love, self-control, patience, kindness. The fruits were not good fruits. So I grew up just hating religion. I grew up hating church. I grew up angry, and so much so that I did not take direction from anybody after my foot. And I was very good at sports. I'm very gifted physically, and I played 3 sports in school, and just was all the things. But right after football, my senior year with a 3.0, I dropped out and started working. I'm like, I'm gonna make money. I'm gonna kill it. And I started working for a guy who was doing what I'm doing now in Tallahassee. He was an All-American football player, a Marine, and he loved the women like I still love, because I'm single. That's one of my things. My dad will say, guy loves God, money, and women. Well, he's right. I'm a lot like Solomon. He wrote the Songs of Solomon. That's the horniest book in the Bible. Well, I love God, money, and women. And I'm not always proud of that, because sometimes that can be channeled and hinder me, right? But so back to what I was going. I had a woman that was a dream girl, super beautiful. I met her at St. George Island. The first time I saw her, I just knew like she was the one. And I told her that right off the rip, and ended up getting engaged. She was pregnant with my son. I was working for Marlin at Bowden's, about to open up a franchise of this business. And on paper, everything looked really good. I had a nice truck that I always wanted. I had a house on the golf course. I had a beautiful blonde bombshell, but my heart was far from God. I was cheating. I was snorting cocaine every weekend. I was using every drug I could get my hands on. I was violent. I was like all the things, and I had no peace. I had no joy in my life. So one night I was working late at the hospital, and some of my workout buddies asked me if I wanted to go out. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Went out, had a couple drinks, and I went to the house. Amanda wanted to go. She was pregnant at the time. She wanted to go and get something from the store. And we were headed into Tallahassee and on this commercial highway. And this place is called Innovation Park. It's a windy commercial road, 2 lanes going in, 2 lanes coming out. And the speed limit's probably 50 miles an hour. And there's no residential homes on this road. And I've driven it since I was 16. My best friend lived on the other end of it. And I remember just you winding through it because it's so windy. You just hug the middle line and just cruise on through there. So this night it was raining. It was 1 a.m. and me and Amanda are just vibing. I'm coming around one of those windy corners and boom, I hit something, and I hit something so hard, glass flew in my mouth. I'm like, what was that? And I found out the next day it was an off-duty police officer, and I killed him instantly. 22 years old. He wasn't going to get a chance to go home to his family. It's right before Christmas, so no Christmas for his family. They were going to be planning a funeral instead of a family Christmas. And I was looking at like 45 years, but also trying to deal with the fact that I'd killed somebody and I thought it was over with. So much so that I was just broken. I'm like, man, if I could take my life and give it to him, I would. Like, this is not the plan that I had for myself. You know, I know I'm gifted and God gave me a lot of ability, and I just threw it down the drain. And there's no coming back from this one. So for a year, I was on bond. I went up to North Georgia. This was highly publicized in my hometown. And it was painted in a way that it wasn't, but it didn't matter how it was painted. I was broken, and I knew I was going to prison forever. And I knew that there was very little light at the end of the tunnel. And I was like, man, I'm going to drink, smoke, snort, fight, live wildly because I'm all in. And I did. And by the grace of God, I did catch more charges, but they dropped them that year. I caught more charges, spent time in the county jail in Georgia with an ankle monitor on, but by the grace of God, they dropped him because he had bigger plans for me. So essentially, I remember during this time, I was going up to the mountains because me and my dad and parents have a mountain house in North Carolina. We were riding up the mountain, just me and my dad. And he was like, and I'm not much to be with at this time. I'm angry, I'm selfish, not fun to be around, and he still was patient and long suffering and put up with me who treated him like crap because that's what kind of man he is. He was saying, hey, guy, check this out. Look at these Smoky Mountains. He's like, you have all of these mountains spread out in front of you that you can see through this windshield, and it's so beautiful. And he's like, now look at the rear view mirror. He's like, it's this big. You're not meant to drive looking behind you. You don't have eyes in the back of the head. You're meant to look forward and focus on your present and your future. You have a future. There's light at the end of the tunnel. And although that didn't touch me then, it touched me enough to where I listened and it penetrated something. So I go, they won't give me a plea bargain. I go plea out to the mercy of the courts. And I'm just like, don't know how I'm going to defend myself other than it was an accident. It was raining. It was I couldn't see him. And he had no reflective gear on. So I'm trying to put it on him. And then something irked me inside and it said, no, God Jones, this one's on you, brother. And you're going to wear this one. And I went in front of Judge Hankinson, and they called him Hang'em Hank. And I went in front of Hankinson. I'm like, Your Honor, I'm going to cut this short and sweet. If I could give my life back for his, I would right now. I apologize so much to the family. I can't even imagine what you're going through. And I shouldn't have been out at that time of night. I shouldn't have been drinking. I am 100% responsible, and I've lived my life in the fast lane. So whatever y'all have to do, I understand. And essentially, they did what they had to do. They gave me 12 years, Department of Corrections in the state of Florida, and I went in off the chain. Like I lived my life off the chain, fighting, do 30 days in the box, get out, snap on an officer, go back to the box 30 days, get out, get some tattoos, get caught tattooing, go back to the box 30 days. But I landed a pretty good job as a medical, really at Bay Correctional. And there was a guy that worked in medical who was a psychologist or psychiatrist, and he always had a smile on his face. He was like 6'7", played football at Florida, big black dude. And when he came in the room, he set the temperature. And I've never seen anybody with a heart like his. Like he took time out of his day to genuinely pour into me. And he knew to get me, he had to compete with me. So he'd take me out. We had basketball shootouts and arm wrestle and talk trash. But I'm like, Coach Ross, man, there's something different about you. He's like, Guy, I have a relationship with Jesus. I'm like, oof, I can see that you do, and that's good. So that night, I went back to my 2-man cell, and I'm hard-headed. I'm not going to believe anything anybody says to me. My stepdad has witnessed to me my entire life. I've been drugged to church my entire life. But I need the God of the creation to come visit me where I'm at for me to understand. So that's what I asked. I'm like, God, if you're real and you're really real, I don't feel like you're real because my life sucks. I got 8 years left. I don't think I'm even going to make it to the end of this thing. I'm broken. Every time I see my son come up here and I can't hold him, or I can't take him to his first day of school, or I'm not going to be able to teach him how to throw a football, or his mom is out dating some other guy. No friend I got has stuck with me. Nobody cares where I'm at. And I'm feeling alone, and nothing I can do will bring any joy. I'm smoking pot here. You know what I'm doing, God. If you're real, take this pain that I'm feeling and remove it. Help me, and I'll serve you. And boom, he showed up, and it felt like the way I explained it was like a whole backpack got lifted off of me. And I was like tears were pouring out of my eyes. And I'm at this point, don't cry normally. And I didn't want to stop crying because it was grace that I was feeling. I just felt a unique sense of, man, I don't deserve this. I'm unworthy of this. This is unmerited favor. And I just had an understanding of that, and just instantly had an understanding of his love for me despite me, and instantly had an understanding that he was always right there waiting for me to turn to him and make the decision. And it touched me. And my whole prison sentence was never the same. After that, I had tremendous favor. If there was no power in a relationship with God, I wouldn't want to serve that God. My God has so much power, and he showed up. I'll tell you, I was less locked up than most people are on the streets, meaning I've had more freedom in prison with no AC, in prison with 100 dudes in open dorms that all wanted to kill me and all wanted to kill each other and hated everybody, and negativity that you could cut with a knife. I had more favor with gangs, wardens, officers, inmates. It didn't matter. God showed up for me, and I could tell 100 stories of how he showed up with me. And I didn't change who I was in the fact that I was bold. I was a man of courage. When my number was called, I showed up. God hates a coward. God's all about your heart. And he also understands your shortcomings, but he hates doubt. He hates fear. He does not like a man who's not courageous, because when you are courageous, you're courageous because you know God is with you and he's for you, and nothing that comes up against you can take the salvation that he's readily gifted you with. So there's no reason to fear any man or anything of this earth. And I was walking in that freedom, and people could see it, and people's lives were getting changed in there, and he was guiding me, and I got ready to go to work release. I'd been in for 9 years. Work release, you can wear your own street clothes. You finally get a phone. Before I went in, there was no smartphones. Now there are smartphones. So I got a phone. I didn't have to wear a blue uniform anymore. I got my own clothing, and they gave me a job. So I was working in the streets, working for a company that welded small metal buildings together. So I would ride my bike across town to work to save the money from having to pay for a transport van, because I was trying to save up to start a business. And I would listen to the Steve Weatherford show. And it was a podcast, and we weren't allowed to be on social media. We weren't allowed to be on like dating sites or anything like that, but we were allowed to be on Spotify. So I found this podcast, and I'll tell you why it appealed to me. Because Steve Weatherford was a decathlon guy, and there's a bunch of events, right? Maybe 10 events, I don't know. But he was saying, man, I didn't finish first in anything. Man, I'd finish second, fourth, third, second, fifth. But at the end of the year, I was an All-American. Why? Because I showed up in everything. That's how you got to do in life. You got to show up in your kingdom, in your health, in your family, and in your wealth. You show up in those spheres, and you're going to be doing good. Not only did he talk about that, he talked about being intentional with his family. He talked about intentionally dating his daughters, intentionally dating his wife. And this was all unique way of thinking for a ratchet guy that had been in prison for a long time, that never had a real relationship as an adult, who never not cheated on a girl, who just, so this thinking appealed to me. So one morning at 4:30 a.m., I heard a voice say, "Guy, you're going to be on this podcast." I'm like, me? And I'm a 3-time felon. I've screwed up everything I've ever touched. What you mean I'm going to be on this podcast? I'm still in prison. Guy, you're going to be on this podcast. Okay, Lord, since I've served you, you've never lied to me. So anyways, I get out of prison. a guy from my hometown. I called him the week before I got out. He used to be a good friend of mine. I'm like, Gary, what's up with you, bro? I'm getting out of prison. I know I hadn't talked to you in 10 years, but I feel led to call you. He's like, where are you moving to, guy? And I'm like, man, Lake City. I don't know anybody, but I'm confident. I'm just going to start Pinnacle, this business, and it's going to do well. I'm trying to find a van. I got a like 12,000, 15,000 startup capital, and we're going to make it happen. He's like, well, that's funny because I moved to Lake City after you went in 7 years ago, and I can sub you work, as much work as you need. I can keep you busy. And the day I got out, I signed a contract with him, went and bought a piece of crap work van and picked up my son and took him to the beach. And that was 2.5 years ago. Since then, I paid off all my equipment, but now I have 5 vans, 3 rigs, a nice truck, a business here, a business in Atlanta. I got a guy training to open one up in Texas right now, 2.5 years. Almost every bit of my equipment's paid off by the grace of God. Last year, we were right under $1 million at my Gainesville location and would have hit $1 million had we not pushed things to the next following year, had things not fallen that way. But I just say that to say that's how good the God I serve is. And not because I want a lot of money, because the most gifted part of me is I'm generous. And God realizes that, and my money with Guy is going to do a lot more than my money with anybody else. So he knows I put in to prosper the kingdom. And when you don't hold on to things tightly and you're a good steward of what you have, he gives you more. And I was a good steward of them jobs in prison. I was a good steward of my first beat up van. I would detail it every week, clean the outside of it, maintenance the equipment. I was very particular. I got a piece of crap house, cleaned it up, nice, made it look good. He gave me a nicer house. Cleaned it up, poured a lot into it, love, sweat, tears. God is a creator. He's gifted me to be a creator, and I saw vision for it. And now I'm about to sell this house for a couple $100,000 more than I bought it. And I'm under contract for a nicer dream house. But it's because I'm a good steward, and I have a vision for that house, that I'm going to be baptizing people in my heated pool, that I'm going to be ice bathing and training with people to train their physicality, their mentality, but more so, people are going to be set loose spiritually in that house. And how I told you, God told me I was going to be on Steve Weatherford's podcast. Well, I never asked him. I don't know how I ended up on his couch, but I ended up on his couch. And then I ended up on his couch over and over and over again. And then randomly about a month ago, he asked me to be on his podcast. And I entered a thread when I was at work release of just, if you want to hear about when our podcasts are, or supplements, or whoop bands, or this or that, send your number to this thread and we'll keep you updated. Well, there's probably 100,000 people on that thread, but I'm still in that thread. And like 2 or 3 weeks ago, he said, man, I'm releasing this podcast. I really want you to hear it. Out of all my podcasts, this is the most powerful podcast that I've done. And it's not because of me. It's because God anointed that podcast 3 years ago when I was on a bike riding through the hood of Lake City, Florida, Washington Ave with an orange vest on, praying I didn't get hit by a car, and willing to serve him and be obedient. And God anointed that podcast then. And I had the faith to say, you know what? I will be on that podcast. I accept that. Doubt tried to creep in like it always does. Fear tried to creep in like it always does. But I accept that. And I know if God has a plan and opens a door, no man can shut that door. So that's just what's happened in 2.5 years. since I've been out, but it takes me constantly having to check my intentions, to check my heart, to make sure I'm a good steward of the people that work for me and I'm pouring into them for the kingdom, to make sure I don't get conceited or arrogant as God elevates me, to make sure I continue to be the salt. But what happens if salt goes bad and gets old? It's thrown out. So I want to be the salt that stays preserving other people. I want to be the light that he puts up on a hill. That's my ultimate goal. And and I get it wrong all the time. Every single day I get it wrong. But God doesn't judge my mistakes. He judges the posture of my heart. And because I've learned that he loves me despite me having premarital sex, despite me having smoked pot a few times since I've been out of prison, despite me having drank a little bit too much sometimes since I've been out of prison, despite me lusting after women, having anger in my heart towards people that have screwed me over, but I always go back to him. And I heard Steve say that last weekend I was in Austin and I saw a number of lives transformed. And I heard him say the difference between religion and relationship is religion is me wrecking my car and going to my dad and be like, or thinking, man, I don't want to go to my dad. My dad is going to be pissed. And dad, like, gosh, I got to go to my dad. And relationship is when you wreck your first car and you're like, man, I got to go to my dad. My dad will know what to do with this. He'll know how to get me out of this. So I think we're misconceived a lot of times and we're condemning ourselves. And it's good to be convicted. Conviction is a good thing, but condemnation is from Satan. That's not from God. And that keeps more men down. So that's why I don't mind talking about the stuff I do wrong, because we all have junk. But this is what I've learned, that despite my mistakes, God continues to use me because he loves my heart for him. He loves that I give him the glory for what he's doing. He loves that I may fall down 7 times, but I'm getting back up the 8th time. He loves that I'm not a coward and listen to the devil say, man, you can't go witness, bro. You were just out hooking up with a chick last week. Or you can't go witness. You were out snapping on somebody at work. Well, you know what? I can go witness. I'm called to go witness because God has been so good to me despite myself. And I just tell y'all that to unlock you from you. So, and the way you get set free from this. So how do you get set free? Your faith sets you free, and the grace that was extended to you, his love for you while you were still in sin, while you were living in filth, like the prodigal son. You had took your inheritance, you had run off, had partied, had sex, did drugs, drank all your money away, and you're like, man, I'm living in filth. I've lost everything. And all that stuff I try to fill this God-sized hole with was not enough to get it done. I'm just going to go home because my dad's slaves get treated better than this. And the prodigal son went home despite living in filth, and his dad ran out, had his other brother kill the best fatted calf, put his best robe on him, a ring on his finger, and said, son, I love you. You are mine. Come on. You're not living with a slave. You're not living down here, brother. I'm elevating you, son, because I love you. And that's who we serve. We serve such a God of grace, mercy. And I want to extend that mercy to you from you so you understand and you can be unlocked, because we're in a dark world. And one thing I know is that these kids have no men to look up to. because these men are too scared to be bold about their faith. They're too scared they're too non-present to get off their phone and pour into somebody else. They're too selfish to sacrifice time to spend with other people. And these kids have no mentors. So they're running around taking mentors out of what they're hearing in music, taking mentors out of what they're seeing on the football field or seeing in the locker room. They're taking mentors out of entertainers. They're taking mentors out of, watching porn. That's what they're mimicking because they have nothing better to mimic. I want to be an image of possibility. Like, man, I know Braxton's dad, he's got a nice truck and he works out. He's fit. He's a stud and he loves the Lord and he's always in a good mood. And he's got what a lot of these other people have, but he's present. He's generous. He is encouraging. He calls me to be better. He tells me what he sees in me. He tells me what I can do, not what I can't do. He tells me who I am. And now I'm getting unlocked. That's what I want for myself. And that's me being in prison and seeing a lot of lost children that are now 40 years old, 50 years old, and they're still in the childlike mentality because they had nobody to guide them or show them a better path or pour into them. So they did what everybody else did around them, and their grandma or their mom, who was working 2 or 3 jobs just to provide for them, couldn't get the job done to show them what a man looked like. And now our prison system, our prison system here in Florida has over 100,000 of these guys that are all the same. Whether they're white, they're all the same. Black, they're all the same. They're not unique. There's no difference between, because they want to be like somebody else and they don't know who they are. So they're all the same and they're all brainwashed. And it's sad because we are all different. We all have a different fingerprint. There'll never be another Guy Jones fingerprint. There never was a Guy Jones fingerprint. There'll never be anybody like me to walk through this earth again, or like Jim to walk through this earth again. We were made specially different, and that those differences are what is God breathed and what we need to be given to people. Instead of comparing ourselves and trying to be like people, we're not being who God, and that's because people make you feel bad about what's different. But when you realize, man, that's a gift from God, and you just are you, and you don't care what anybody thinks about it, except for God. When you're playing for an audience of one, things start shifting, and that becomes attractive. And that'll set you free because you're not having to hide who you are. And you just accept that, hey, man, God made me a little bit different. And I'm going to show these differences off with boldness for the kingdom and be spirit-led, and watch what happens when the super meets your natural and you become supernaturally gifted by being infused with the Holy Spirit. Watch what happens in your workplace and your home and the community. I know it because some guys that work for me have been set free and their whole family dynamics have shifted. And it's just allowing the Holy Spirit to make everything around you better, to bring heaven down to earth in the day of the living. That's what we're supposed to be experiencing here on earth. We don't have to wait to heaven to achieve all our inheritance, and we can enjoy life right now, right here. We can have peace that surpasses all understanding in the midst of a storm, right here on this earth, in the middle of a 10-year prison bid, in the middle of gangs trying to kill each other, in the middle of people trying to kill you, in the middle of being locked down in a dorm with no air conditioning, in the middle of being locked down for 40 days in a little room for COVID. with nothing but a couple pieces of paper and a Bible, you can be set free by one thing, and that's a relationship with Jesus Christ. And I'm the most hard-headed person. You got to show me. I'm from Missouri, the show me state. I'm really not. I'm from Florida, but I like to say that. You have to show me. God shows me every single day because I'm hard-headed. And I ask him to give me God moments today. Give me God moments today. Allow me to see you at work today and just be a part of it. And that's always my prayer is, help me serve you better. Lead me where you want me to go, and I'll go. And when you have that prayer, or this is a good one to pray, like, Holy Spirit, wreck me. Wreck me, Holy Spirit. Break me down and build me. Have your way with me. And every time I pray that prayer, I get wrecked spiritually. And every time it softens my heart a little more. And it softens my heart. It humbles me. And I'll tell you, I'll go to church a lot of times and people will be like worshiping God with their hands up. And I'll just like bow to him as King of the Kings, Lord of Lords, and just be so thankful for everything that he's done for me. And if he never blessed me again, and today was the last blessing, being on this Half Cake podcast was the last blessing, then that's sufficient. He's done more than enough. I never thought I would get out of prison. I never thought they'd say, "Hey, Guy Jones, roll your stuff up, kick rocks. You're not even allowed to be here anymore." I never thought I would ever get out of prison. So everything after that point is a blessing to me. So you got to find your blessings and find what you're thankful for. And that's between you and God. So you got to wrestle with God.
Man, it's such a amazing story of redemption and restoration, and it's not lost on me. You talked about for 10 years you're wearing a blue uniform, stuck in all the anger and the rage and the ways, and now you spend your days wearing a different blue uniform, serving and washing and restoring other people around you. And the contrast to that, to me, is really so special, and just goes to show how there is no lost cause. Like the restoration that can come from really showing up and just having faith and following your heart and understanding it's not just, you're not stuck, man. And I think that that's such a powerful thing, because there are so many people who struggle with, they've made mistakes, they continue to make mistakes, or they're stuck in some old ways, or they feel like they're not worth it. But when you look at the different things that you've gone through, the different things you've seen, the different things that you will still continue to see, but how now you look at it through a different lens is so incredibly powerful. And I just want to thank you for that. That was a lot of vulnerability and transparency, and to be able to just remove the ego and pride and actually allow people to see that real raw, transcription of what's happened through your life is powerful, man. So, I want to honor you for that. And I'm curious if you could kind of take me through a little bit of the process of leaving that past version of yourself behind, because for a lot of people, right, you went to prison for 10 years, they knew you as one version, right, and now you come back and it's almost like a different person. So I'm curious how you go about now re-entering society, building relationship back with your son, because it's obviously going to be very different outside versus in. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that relationship and kind of how that worked for you.
So, yeah, I want to answer that. But first, I want to say I'll never be on a person's podcast that is not bearing fruit and that is not real with me and that is not willing to get vulnerable, because I feel like a relationship's built off of vulnerability. So that's why I'm on this podcast. First off, is because Jim is an excellent man of honor that's willing to be real and vulnerable, even when it makes him look bad. So that's why it's a blessing to be on this podcast. And then changing comes not from willpower. In my experience, change comes from God doing work inside of you, in your heart, and you allowing and making space for him to do work inside of you. If you try to change because of your own willpower, it'll only get you so far and you'll fall back off the wagon. You can only read so many self-help books, and that change is temporary, but real change comes from you constantly transforming your mind, being renewed by the transforming of your mind. So that comes through hearing the word, that comes through having relationships where iron sharpens iron with men of faith. That comes from doing the dirty work. That comes from every time I'm vulnerable and real to help somebody else out when I know somebody else is going to scoff, laugh, make fun of me, or not appreciate what I'm doing. That comes from me humbling myself and being like, you know what, if I just help the one. And God came for the one. So if you're listening to this podcast and you are the one that's not quite sure, or you don't understand if it's real, or you're struggling with purpose, like what is the purpose of me being on this earth? Am I just here to feed my body, feed my flesh, go through the daily motions, avoid resistance, and live an easy life, or just do this meager job, day in, day out? What is the purpose? Well, I don't have all the answers, but what I do know is that the God of the universe is waiting patiently for you to humble yourself and have a real conversation, because he sees all. So you can't hide that porn that you watched last night while your wife was asleep. You can't hide those prescription drugs you do on the low. You can't hide that you like to smoke weed, and that's not hindering him from loving you. None of that's hindering. There's nothing that you can do or nothing that you have done that he hasn't seen and that would keep him from loving you. He's not your earthly father. He's so much more than your earthly father. So what I'm saying is, today you can have the same power that I have, and the same power that rose him from the grave. You can do wonders, works, by accepting him in your life. And you don't even have to accept him. You can wrestle with him. But it's got to be here, and it's got to be real and authentic, and it's got to be with a broken and contrite heart, at least for me. God, show up. Show me you're real. Visit me. Give me confirmation. I'm a very little faith. And there's a perfect replication of that in the Bible with a doubter who doubted God. And there was another replication of it with a man who wrestled with God, and he got his inheritance and a new name from wrestling with God. So that's what you got. If you have these questions, and it's the most important question that you could ever ask, is why am I here? And what is my purpose on this earth? It's the most important question. And if you don't ask that question, you are ignorant. Your brain, ask that question. It's a valuable question. And I only say that way because I love you, and you have got to wake up today. Today is the day. So, and then if you want to make change and you are a different person, you don't change to be super righteous, on your own will. You're not on the corner praying out loud so people can hear you. You're not doing the things that you think people want you to do or expect to see from a Christian. You're being real. You're being authentic. You're being you, and you're working through the natural change that God's put in your heart, and you're asking him, hey, I struggle with this. Can you help me with this? I struggle. And you're going to him about everything. God, my business is slowing down. Economy is slowing down. Where would you have me go? Who would you have me keep? Would you have me take more people on? Lord, I want to provide for people. I want to be a light to people. I don't want to let go of people. I want to continue to grow as the economy. What steps do I need to do? God, I'm listening. And every petition of your heart, you go to God about, and he wants to partner up with you and give you life and life more abundantly. And I just believe that today, people that are saved are going to get some revelation and be unlocked for the kingdom purpose, that they would be a lighthouse in their family, in their community, that they would be bold men of God and stop and talk to somebody today that may not be somebody that impresses them, or maybe not be somebody that they think much about, but they would sacrifice their time and bless somebody else, and they put their phones down and be present with their children, and that these believers would be unlocked, be bold men for the kingdom, be strong and of good courage. And then I pray that the ones that don't know God would take something I said, go back and wrestle with God, would be unlocked, and would shoot a text or review to Half Cakes and say, Jim Sabellico, I received it today. My name is so-and-so, so Jim can get you some support. And so we can walk this thing out. We got to walk it out with other brothers, because iron sharpens iron, and it's a dark world. And we want to come alongside you. I will personally, if you reach out to me, and you can find me on Instagram or Facebook, or my number is 404-695-6718. You can call me personally, and I'll talk with you and try to set you up, or give you some people in an area close to you, and let's get you engaged for the kingdom, because the kingdom needs you. This world needs you. Your family needs you. Be strong and of good courage. Today's the day.
I love that very much, and I love you and your heart for that, because that's what this entire thing is about: is showing people possibility, and not having to accept half cakes in your life. And I know that for me, that half cake originally was my son's birthday cake, right? It was me showing up as a stranger in my house, but it's grown to be so much more than that, and not accepting less than the best, right? Not accepting a half cake in your fitness, in your relationships, in your spirituality, in your health, in literally every part of your life, and accepting nothing but whole, complete, the absolute best, right? And really defining success as more than just, how much money you have in the bank, what kind of car you drive, how your house looks, but man, what kind of legacy are you leaving? Are you impacting people that you meet on the street? Are you giving people a different vision of possibility? And what you just said just there, and especially your openness and willingness to serve, like to show up for people that you've never even met before. Some dude who you may never know might send you a text and say, hey, I love what you said, and I was inspired by it, and I'd love to talk. And I know with a high degree of certainty, you would give them the same amount of love and attention that you just sat here and gave to me. And it doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't matter what they can do for you, because, that's the person that you are. And I think that speaks a lot to the journey that you've been through, and how much you understand the importance of that, because it's not about where you've been. We've all done silly things. We've all made mistakes. And, I think to a degree, we all continue to do stuff. We're not perfect people, but I think it depends on your heart, your intentionality, and how much you continue to pursue that, right? To continue those, the relationships, and to continue that growth, and to put the pride and the ego aside and say, hey man, I goofed up. Look, and you and I have had conversation where he said, look, I may not have been perfect in this thing. I'd love for your guidance and feedback. I'd love for your perspective, and be willing to get the harsh truth, which sometimes sucks. But like when you're willing to stand up to another brother and say, hey man, I need your guidance, I need your help, I need your support because I wasn't the best in this area. And when you have those relationships around you, whether that's me to you or any of the other, dozens of people that we've built those relationships over time with, there's so much goodness and so much power in that. And I can't emphasize enough how important it is to have those relationships, because it's almost like a cheat code, right? You've got these people in your life who now they're supporting you harder than anyone has ever supported you before. And it's not for their own benefit. It's because they know that rising tide lifts all boats. And they know that if they need you for something, you're going to be there too. And not just for a discount on a job, or like, not for the traditional stuff that most people lean on other people for, but like that real raw love and support. And I honor you for walking that every day, and continuing to show up and to serve. And like I said before, especially knowing how you serve in your business. And I've been part of some of your early morning meetings, like the things that you do in your business. It's not just, hey, we run a successful business, guys, go out there and make some money for us, come back and pay me so I can go live a life, and you guys can just be, peons. Like, you show up in your business every day and you have the conversation with the people on your team to pour into them for not just how to be efficient worker bees, but like how to be full humans, how to have that full cake life in your business. So I'd love just some insight from you on how you've seen that work inside the business, and how you show up as that servant leader inside there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And good question. And I'm pretty sure like some of the things that I do business wise are illegal to do as far as with my faith. And matter of fact, we built the biggest cross in my town that I work at. And I'm moving to High Springs. We got the biggest cross, and it's stained and glossed, and we planted that thing down right in the front of my business, just as kind of a covenant that that's what we're going to do at Pinnacle. We're going to be an impact, and we're going to be a lighthouse for the kingdom. And when you drive by here and your life's falling apart because your wife cheated on you and she's divorcing you, and you're thinking about taking your life, and you look up and see that huge cross and that lighthouse, I just pray that hearts are touched, and it gives people hope, and it points them to the answer. So I just live bold for the kingdom. And I don't worry necessarily about how it makes me look or if I'm doing it right or wrong. I just live bold for the kingdom and let it shake out how it shakes out, because I know ultimately God's in control. And I think it's made a huge impact for the positive in my business, because now I have better employees, and now these employees become better for their families. So now they're at work, they're happier because they got some peace in their household. So they slept good at night. And when I do get it wrong, because I'm hard charger and I'm very driven, and I can be abrasive at times, they don't judge me off my actions, but they know my heart, because I take time with them to help them set goals and vision for their family. I take time and help them set goals and vision for their wealth, for their health, and for the kingdom. And so ultimately they buy in, and they understand that this is going to be a place of growth because of the principles and values that we operate by. So, and then I have awesome speakers and teachers that teach them every Monday, from Jim Sabellico to Travis Terrebonne to Frank Ortega to Pierce Shaw to Steve Weatherford, to, just really guys that all have different strengths. And so they're getting what I pay money to go get, or what I would pay money to go get coaching wise. They're getting paid to do that and to get that coaching. So they're blessed. And it's making them all together just be, when I go, man, we only get good reviews. Last year we got 145-star reviews. We don't have the first bad review. I can't tell you how many customers are like, man, your team is awesome. They are so good. Like, they're blown away. Everybody on my team could be considered the owner or the manager in somebody else's mind. Like, they go out there and it's like, I think he's the manager or the owner, just because of the way they carry themselves, and they can move in autonomy because they have the freedom to move in autonomy because of who they become, because of whose they are, and them starting to know whose they are unlocks them to really just be that person of excellence and operate in a spirit of excellence.
Yeah, I think that's so incredibly important, because you see so many people who operate a business as, quote unquote leader, who are going to be there and really dictate the way that someone's going to show up. And you can tell as a customer or as an observer the difference between someone who leads their business as a dictator, who wants to just force their people to go out and just do the job and check the box, compared to someone who actually puts their ego and pride aside and is not all about, hey, I'm the president, I'm the CEO, I've got my name on the door, look how cool I am, but rather puts that energy into building their people. And yeah, you don't care if someone else thinks the other person's the boss, the other person's the leader. Who cares? Because it's not for your glory. And I think that's just a tremendous difference that I wish people would take away from this. And that being that servant leader and being willing to go wash feet and to serve and to show up, to literally sacrifice your pride and ego, right? Because I think you've been through a spot where you're not afraid to be judged. And I'm sure, having done the things you've done and lived the life you've lived, you've been judged a lot, right? You've been criticized, you've been your name in the paper, like, people are going to judge you, and you get to a point where you realize, like, okay, cool, it doesn't define who I am. Like, I'm willing to be judged because I know what I stand for, and your opinion of that isn't going to affect who I am or the things that I do. And that's a really freeing feeling, right? But that doesn't just come from deciding to do it. It comes from putting in the work, from going through those really difficult times, and from being willing to submit and to serve. And there's just so much power in that as a leader. And that's not just a leader of a business, it's a leader of family, a community, of yourself. And I commend you for walking that out every day.
Absolutely. Thank you, brother. And you're only being judged if you're a player in the game. So if you're a spectator and you're watching a football game and you're like, man, I would have caught that pass, or man, I would have ran the ball better than that. You're sitting over there judging from the sideline, but nobody's sitting there judging you. You're meaningless in the game. So what somebody else is doing judging you, if you're not getting some judgment, if you're not getting some people that are hating on you, you're not doing something right. You're not in the game. You're not making impact. So you need people that are judging you. You need people that don't like what you're doing. You need people that don't like the name of your podcast. You need people that have the spirit of religion on them and want to hit you with the book of law over and over and over again. You need those people. So that's why I do a lot of what I do, is because I'm like, no, that's not the right way. And if you actually do read the Bible, and because people talk about the Bible, quote the Bible, but most of the people that are beating you up with it have never fully read it, or they don't have eyes to see and ears to hear. But that book will unlock you and free you from law. It'll unlock you and free you from doubt. It'll unlock you, free you from fear, anxiety, depression. It's got all the answers. It's got some awesome warriors. It's got a man after God's own heart who actually took some other guy's wife and killed her husband and made some of the biggest blunders. But God, at the end of everything, says he's a man after God's own heart. So it has the prodigal son. It just gives me all the proof I need and unlocks me enough to go be a player in the game, and not just a player, but a first round draft pick. So if you want to get unlocked, read it for yourself and let the Holy Spirit guide you. And don't listen to what your pastor says, or what your mom says, or what your grandma says, or what your dad says, but find out for yourself, because you owe that to yourself. You owe that to your family, and you owe that to your workplace. But ultimately, you owe that to the King of Kings.
Yeah, I agree. And as you're saying that, what I'm hearing and seeing is there are some people who are afraid of going through that process because it's uncomfortable, right? It's really uncomfortable to face that and to think about where you're at in the moment. But I'm also reflecting on, it took you being brought to a place of isolation. It took you shutting out everything that you were receiving from the outside world and literally being put in isolation. And then it took you being put around somebody else who showed up as a definition of possibility, or you recognize that they moved through life differently. And I want to just emphasize those 2 points, because I think there's so many people who are right now who are sitting there suffering from this place of discomfort, knowing that where they're at right now isn't where they want to be, right? Whether you're struggling with whatever you're struggling with, right? Because there's so many different things that people struggle with day to day. It's a really crippling thought. Like, how do I accept it? How do I, take ownership of it? And how do I move forward? And I think it's not going to be until you realize it's you versus you, right? You gotta be willing to sit with yourself in isolation and address the things that are on your heart. Not worry about what other people are saying. Like, just take ownership of where you're at yourself. Okay, it doesn't matter if anyone else understands. It doesn't matter if anyone else sees it the way you see it. If you're willing to sit in isolation and get real with yourself on where you're at, then surround yourself with definitions of possibility. Then get around people who operate differently. Get around a guy like Guy. Get around a guy like Steve. You get around people who are operating at a different level because they've been there, right? And I think to a degree, most of us have been through some stuff, right? And if you look at the people who have, quote unquote, gotten somewhere, most of them have been in really dark places that, a lot of people don't hear that part of the story because it's not glorious. It's not fun. I think it takes a lot of vulnerability and transparency to even share that. Because for most people, they'd be afraid of being judged or criticized or laughed at or mocked or whatever it is. But to me, just understanding that, being willing to sit in isolation with yourself and really own where you're at, and then get surrounded by other people who will give you that version of possibility, who will accept you and support you and encourage you, I think is just a tremendous point I want to drive home for people who are sitting there struggling, like thinking about all the things that they're going through, and how do you operate, and how do you move forward, and how do you continue to grow when it feels overwhelming.
Good word, brother. And if I can, I want to close this out in prayer. Is that cool?
It is. I have 2 more questions for you if I could, and then I would love to do that. Question number 1, if this is the last time we spoke and you had one bit of advice to give me, what would that advice be?
So I would say, make sure you select the people that you're around, the people that you choose to do time with, very valuably. You're only as good as the people that you're talking with every day, you come in contact with. Iron does sharpen iron. A 2-stranded cord's hard to break. 3 strands are almost impossible to break. You have to have men around you that can pour into your deficiencies, that can encourage your strengths, that can show you your threats, that can point out opportunities, that you can bounce your feelings off of, that you can bounce your ideas off of. You're only as good as the people around you. And if you don't have people around you that are valuable, pray that God puts people in your life that will lift you up and encourage. And don't be afraid to let people go or cut people off, or just because you're constantly weeding out and making sure that the people around you are holding you accountable, that they're elevating you, and that they're going to pour into you, and you're doing the same thing. So you're only going to be as efficient and as excellent as the people around you.
I love that. All right, last question, and this wouldn't be the No Half Cake podcast if we didn't talk about cake at some point. You and I are together. We're celebrating life. What is your go-to cake choice?
Oof, that's good. And I do like sweets. So my grandma, she makes like a pecan pie that is like awesome, but like I'm a cheesecake guy, so I really appreciate a good cheesecake. And then I also like ice cream. And like I really like these places that like throw the ice cream on the hot stones. Like there's some cool, they do some cool stuff now. So man, just about anything. But if I had to choose, probably like some cheesecake with some butter pecan ice cream. That would be perfect. And if they found out a way to put some whey protein in it, then that would be triple dimensional for me.
All right. We'll have to work on that. But listen, man, I can't thank you enough for this conversation. And it really was powerful for me. And I know that there are people who are going to need to hear this today. So again, I want to thank you and honor you for showing up and for being that vulnerable, authentic version of yourself. And again, I know that there's going to be people who will be transformed by hearing that. So just incredible honor to you. And if you would pray us out, I would absolutely love that.
Yeah, love you, brother. And that was a lot of fun. And thank you. I really generally appreciated this time. So yeah, I'll close this out. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for the gifts that you so freely give us. Thank you for Jim Sabellico, his family, his friends, his listeners, his audience. Lord, continue to elevate and grow him as a human, him as a spirit man, him as a leader. Continue to grow the people that listen to this podcast that are within the sound of my voice. Lord, touch them, touch their families. Lord, may they leave this podcast not the same that they came in. May they have the right words at the right time for the right people. May they have the right words for themselves. May their words fall in the right ears today. May they see you in their moments today, and may they continue to grow their faith to know that all things are possible. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.